I'm Tim.
And I'm Sarah. We're the Ambroses.
Yes, we are.
So we're serving here as leaders on YWAM Denver staff. I've been here for about 6.5 years, and
Yeah, I've been here, in February it'll be 10, so do the math.
so yeah. Tonight we just kind of wanted to chat about something that tends to be a question we get a lot, as well as something we talk a lot about. It's the subject of provision, and specifically God's provision. I know we've both, again, served here for many years, and as all of our staff raise our own support, we tend to run into this question a lot of what happens when you need to travel or you need to provide groceries for your family. What does that look like? And I know you've had several opportunities to travel overseas during your 9.5 years here, and just getting to lead lots of different teams. Have you seen God's provision on any of these trips? Are there stories that you can think of?
Oh, yeah, totally. So a couple of stories come to mind, but one that stands out more than the others, definitely. So I remember I was the assistant leader for one of the Around the World DTSs, or ATW, and we were going to our second location at that time, and it was England, of all places. So we were heading into England, and while we were flying from Costa Rica, our first location, to London, England, there was an email that was sent from our contacts that we were supposed to be working with, saying, shortest way of saying it is, sorry, we can't host you anymore, and you can't stay at our place anymore. So sorry, but we were already in the air on our way to England, and so it just created some issues, complexities, because we like to have things figured out just as much as the other or anyone else would. But when we landed, Ruth, the leader of this specific outreach, she checked her phone and found out that we had lost our contacts. Luckily, we landed in London right around 5 a.m., I want to say. And so we had the majority of that first day where we were just able to go throughout all the streets of London and hit up every single person that we knew. Asking, hey, can you just give us a place to sleep for the night? Hey, can you do this? We looked at hostels, we looked at different YWAM bases, just all the friends that we had, anyone and everyone, we would ask them for help. And it wasn't until we ran out of every single person, every contact that we had, that randomly Ruth got messaged by this one friend of hers that she did DTS with years before. And he's like, hey, I feel like the Lord's put you on my mind. Hey, how are you? And she's like, I'm not doing so well. This is what's going on. We're in London right now. We just lost our place to sleep. Turns out he just got hired by a church in London, but he's not even from England. And so she had no way of knowing that.
That's so crazy.
And so we didn't even reach out to this guy. But he ends up saying, well, I can't really let you stay at our church, but this, and this. We kept talking with him, wanted to just meet up, or he wanted to meet up with us anyways, and we're like, well, we got nothing else going on. But at this point, it's pretty late in the evening, I want to say, more like 5 p.m., so it's been about 12 hours. We didn't sleep at all that night either. And so we're pretty emotionally distraught and thinking to ourselves how poor and horrible leaders that we are, because we're leading a team of 12 students and we have nowhere for them to stay at all. And so the pressure was on, and this guy, I forget his name, but he ends up saying, you know what, just for tonight I'll stay at the church with you, because insurance-wise we couldn't stay at the church unless there was someone on staff at the church with us. And so he basically just decided to stay at the church with us. We found out that he had a 2-month-old kid. So his wife and him just had their first kid, and he's called up his wife and said, hey, I feel like the Lord's asked me to do something. I'm not going to be home tonight. Told her what's going on and all that. So he stayed at the church with us. Now Ruth and I, we woke up early the next morning because we really needed to pray pray, like, God, please help us. I was like, what are we gonna do? We got first night out of the way, but what are we gonna do? It turns out the property manager for this church, he was there and did not know that we were gonna be there, or these 14 people were gonna be there, and so he was kind of grilling some of our students at the time. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. He's a great guy. His name is John. He was asking a lot of questions and was very much like, what are you doing here? Well, you can't stay here, that kind of stuff. And Ruth and I were like, okay, sweet, we'll be out, just give us a couple hours, breakfast at least, we'll go get it. So we started having our meetings, started praying with the team, and I remember being there, talking to the team, trying to do that thing where we really want to act like we have faith, but really mine was low at the time, and so I was putting up a front kind of thing to not let the students know how distraught I was, or how close to tears I was at the time. And I remember John just constantly peeking around the corner, like opening the door, checking in on us, kind of stuff. And eventually he comes in and just kind of like says, Tim, can I talk to you? In the middle of one of our meetings. So I go out and talk to him, and he's like, hey, I felt like the Lord wanted to host you here, actually. It's like, would that be okay? Do you need a place to stay? I was like, yeah, we totally need a place to stay. So he's like, okay. So this church that we were at, because we went there pretty late at night, about 10 o'clock p.m. We didn't get to see all the surroundings necessarily, but what we found out that day when we went out is this church is a 5-minute walk from Westminster Abbey in London, so downtown London. We had lost our previous contacts, clearly, while we were in the air. But this church is also a highly evangelistic church, and so they did a lot of outreach, specifically in line with some of the types of outreach that YWAM tends to do as well. And so in the course of this one act of kindness by Ruth's friend, and the Lord speaking to this guy, John, this team of 14 people ended up having a place to stay for 2 weeks. And not just that, but they decided that as a church they wanted to host us and not just give us a place to stay and outreach to do, but they paid for everything. And so what was going to be the most expensive part of our outreach ended up being the cheapest because of that. So that's the first story that comes to mind about God's provision specifically in outreach.
So you show up in England, foreign country, don't really know anything or anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know the language at least, but...
Well, yes, thankfully.
Bad joke, I know.
But you end up there, you've lost housing, and all your plans have just hit the ground, and all of a sudden the Lord steps in through some unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, definitely.
And provides not only housing, but you mentioned they paid for a lot of food, and ministry provided options to go out and work in the city, and working with them gave you someone who's there long term to work alongside, which I know is something we in YWAM really look for in contacts when we were working overseas. So that's really awesome. That's amazing that God did that.
It was really cool, definitely. Good story.
Yeah. So I know outreach obviously is a big part of our lives here at YWAM, and we really like to see God provide for us on outreach, and that happens all the time. Like, I've seen God provide housing when it fell through. So many different stories from outreach. Any of our staff could tell you their own stories, but I know in your own life you've kind of been on both sides of being the one providing, as well as, or part of God providing for someone, as well as receiving God's provision as well. So I wondered if you could share with us some of those moments in your life.
Yeah, I'd love to. So there was a time when relying on God for provision was not an easy thing for me to do, because I had not necessarily seen the divine miracles or miraculous provision that God had. It was just, you're faithful and with stewarding what God has given you, and you do it to the best of your ability and don't live outside your means, and that's how God provides. That was my lifestyle before coming to do our discipleship training school, or my discipleship training school specifically. But during my discipleship training school, or DTS, we had this moment where I had this moment where my school director was really encouraging me to just listen to God, try to take a chance, trust Him more. What's one of the ways it's hard for you to do that? And so I was trying my best, okay, sweet, because I really want to have a good, solid, deep relationship with the Lord. And so I started asking, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Is there anything, or do you just want me to trust you right now? I'm like, you'll do your part kind of thing, and I just have to sit here. And I remember getting this feeling that the Lord was asking me to take all the money that was in my wallet
Oh boy.
and to give it to this other guy that was in my school. And that was hard for me because that was all of the finances that I was ever going to have while on outreach or mission trip that was only 1 week away. And so it was pretty difficult at me to do that. So I counted it up. It was $74, and I said, "No, God, I'm not doing that because that's not a whole lot." And I wanted to have clean laundry on outreach. Right? We're going to Colombia. It was gonna be pretty warm where we were going, and I wanted to at least be able to have clean laundry. But eventually the Lord won, and so I didn't even give it away to the kid in a great humble way. I was just kind of like, "Here, I'm done with this. You can have this. The Lord wants you to have it," and whatever. So I gave it to him that morning, and the school director went down and got all of our mail that was been accumulating at the other campus down the mountain for the week. And it turns out that people from my church had pulled together their resources and just said, "Hey, let's send him a love offering," that kind of thing. And so I opened up all of these letters, individual letters from individual members, and it was all cash, and it added up to exactly what I had given away, $74.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was humbling to say the least,
No kidding.
because I had such a hard time being like, "God, if I give this away, I don't actually believe that you're going to take care of me." But in that very day, He showed me. It's like I gave $74 away, and then He gave me $74 back, and it's like as if He were saying to me audibly, almost like, I'm gonna take care of you, Tim. Just trust me, And it was humbling. But I remember that was the first time that I really got to see God provide for me specifically in ways that, and it wasn't a grand amount. It wasn't thousands of dollars, but it meant a lot more than it would have if it was thousands of dollars.
Yeah. That's incredible. It's always amazing to me to watch when our students come and do different programs, whether it's a secondary school or a discipleship training school, getting to watch God provide for them, whether that was through their home church, parents, friends, family, their job back home, or sometimes we've even seen people receive thousands of dollars from people who you would look at and think they don't have any money. And it's just been an amazing journey to watch that experience for them.
Oh yeah,
And I know
definitely.
you've also seen that a lot, and it's just a beautiful thing. But so tell us a story about how God has used you to help provide, sometimes in a big way, for other people as a missionary.
Oh yeah, I got just a story for this. So here at YWAM, one of the things that we like to do is to worship God in different ways. So worship isn't always just singing praises to God, even though that is amazing as well. But rather, one of the ways that we try to worship in different ways is recognize the blessings and the things that He has given us to steward, and that they're ours to steward, but not ours to keep, per se. But sometimes, we just keep them as long as God allows us to, that kind of thing. But I remember this one giving night is what we called it, where it's like, okay, God, all of the stuff that I have right now, it's really yours. What is it that would be better for this other person to have? Steward, and what can I do? That's kind of the question that you ask. And so I asked God, about this, and I was a staff for a Borders DTS, snowboarders and skiers DTS specifically, and there was a kid there in this DTS. He was one of those people that's generous to a fault, but he's generous almost in a guilty way, and he's a great guy, but he and I had developed a good friendship, and he had a really nice car. And so the first thing that I did during this giving night was to go up to this guy and say, "Hey, listen, don't even think about giving your car away unless you get a word of the Lord," kind of stuff. And he goes, "Oh, thank you so much, and thank God." That was the first thing that came to mind, and it was more out of guilt, but I just needed someone to tell me that. So that was really cool. So anyways, I was staff. And so I did the righteous thing, and I went and asked God, "Okay, God, what do you have for me to give away?" And the first thing he says is, "Give your car away." Shoot. All right, because I didn't really expect that. But
That's a big give.
well, yeah, it was also ironic because I had just told someone else, "Don't do it unless you get a word of the Lord," and then the word of the Lord to me was, "Give your car." It was just funny. It made me laugh a lot. But so I said, "Okay, sweet. Who am I going to give it to?" I ended up being this guy named Matt. So I went up. I was like, "Hey, I don't have it with me right now. Obviously, can't fit it in this room, but I want to give you my car. And so after this, we'll get all the paperwork figured out, and you can have my car." And so he was super thankful. Ends up that God had been talking to him about the next step in his journey, which was to be going to staff at a different YWAM location in France specifically, but he didn't know French. And so he gets a car, and he's then all of a sudden able to get transportation to where he is getting French lessons. Yeah, and so it was really cool. So God blessed him with this, and then he got French lessons and was able to actually live there because he could speak the language instead of suffering through the language. But then, not just that, afterwards, after he finished his French lessons to the degree that he was comfortable, he ended up selling the car and using that money to get the transportation over there to France, to the location that God had asked him to go to. And so it was an amazing gift, and it was really cool to see God use a little act of obedience to simply let his purposes flow through me into someone else like that, simply with a car.
That's amazing, and it's so cool to see how you, through your generosity and your obedience, were able to actually sow into his ministry in France. But because without you being obedient, surely God would have provided some other way. But he was able to bring you into Matt's story, and I know that led to a lot of awesome things in his own life as well, personally. But that's really cool to hear those stories of God's provision in so many areas and so many different kind of avenues, both on the receiving and the giving side, and how you just got to see that benefit him in multiple ways just by giving your car. That's amazing.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, I know that right now we are in the not in the middle, but coming to the end/middle of this pandemic that's been affecting the entire world, and coronavirus, and we're all at different levels of having to stay home,
Very true.
or maybe rolling out back to work. But a lot of people are in that place of fear about provision and what's next, and just concern about the future in a lot of ways. And I don't know, is there a word you would like to share with us concerning that?
Yeah. First off, I recognize that not everyone would be struggling in the same ways with the will God provide. Maybe some people are better than others at, having a safety net or an emergency fund built up, and this is just like a hiccup along the road. And for others, maybe it's been a lot of bumps along the road to where it already exhausted that. So not everyone's going to be responding the same way. But regardless, I think some good questions for us to be able to ponder is, God, in what way am I not trusting you? Is there a way that you want me to be your hands and feet in someone else's life? And what would that look like if that is a yes? So worrying about those things, because not all of us are going to be struggling in the same way as not everyone lost their jobs. Some of us are essential personnel, maybe even ironically so. But not everyone is going to be as frustrated or as worried as the others may be. So the complexities of it or the severity of it is not going to be the same. But let me read a scripture out for us that talks about the word. It says, so Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 through whenever I stop. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body and what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? So who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? I wanted to encourage us with this, both of us, as well as anyone that's watching. The truth of the matter is that God provides in really crazy ways. We may not be the ones that need provision. Maybe we're safe right now, and God's already been providing, and we've been stewarding it well. I want to challenge you to ask God, hey, do you want me to help provide for someone else? Because we all know people that are suffering or a little bit more scared. How can I bless them? How can I encourage them? How can I help to boost their faith up? How can I remind them of God's love for them? Because I gotta say, it was really cool seeing how God provided for me, but I gotta say that it was a lot cooler to be a part of God providing for other people. That's the one that impacted me the most, I want to say it that way. And so being a part of God providing and continually caring for others is such a valuable thing to do, and it's like the Bible knows what it's talking about when it says it's better to give than it is to receive.
Yeah, and that's so true. I can think of a lot of times where I've had the opportunity to give to others as well, and receive that blessing in my own life of getting to bless someone else and see just how that plays out in their life and in their story, whether it's in a ministry situation or an adoption situation or some other kind of scenario. And it is just beautiful how God provides that, that blessing when we're faithful and obedient to give. Even sometimes when I felt like I didn't have what I needed, still stepping out in faith in Him that He would take care of me and choosing to help someone else. Just seeing how God steps in our faithfulness. It's kind of like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. I don't know how this is going to work out. And then it always does. And once again, all of our staff probably have stories like that as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, well, cool. Thanks for joining us tonight and for listening in on this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun just sharing some stories. As always, we'd like to invite you to join us tomorrow night. We'll also be having some different speakers from our leadership team speaking and sharing with you on various topics every weeknight from Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. So be sure to join in.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.